Hello and welcome to Inside 11Alive News Investigates. I'm Jonathan Martin. When you live in Atlanta, driving becomes a way of life. And according to a study released by Forbes just last year, our city ranks as one of the worst for bad driving in the country. 11Alive News Investigates. Zach Merchant has been digging deeper into some of the statewide data for serious accidents to help identify some of the riskiest roads that our viewers need to know about, Zach.
Yeah, and look, it's no big surprise. You know, if you live in a place like Atlanta, traffic is just kind of part of the deal when you live somewhere like this. But now with so many people on the road staying safe, it becomes even more important. And after obtaining data from the Georgia Department of Transportation, we have identified some of the state's most serious roadway crash hotspots. And one in particular stood out. And if you live in the metro, it is a road you probably are already familiar with.
In Atlanta, traffic is a way of life.
It is very normal.
Private driver Jay Springer spends countless hours on Metro Atlanta roads. Congestion, he says, is a hassle, but it's dangerous drivers that keep him watching his mirrors.
Right in front of a semi.
See, the semi, I've seen cars flip all the way up to the other side of that road up there where they've hit other cars.
What goes through your mind when you see something like that?
I pray for their families because I lost someone like that. Yeah, I lost my daughter in the results of a bad car accident.
The wreck that took his daughter's life happened in Kentucky, but Georgia's roads carry their own risks. Georgia Department of Transportation data obtained by 11Alive News Investigates reveals the stretches of road that saw the most serious wrecks from 2013 to 2024.
1906 radio.
4 of the hotspots are all along the downtown connector, making it arguably the most common site for serious accidents in the state. With roughly 110 wrecks involving serious injuries and approximately 20 involving a fatality between 2013 and 2024.
The issue with the connector is obviously we have 2 major interstates that come together at once.
GDOT spokeswoman Natalie Dale describes that long-ago design, completed in the 60s, as less than ideal today, with so many more cars on the road. But she says statistically, it is still quite safe.
When you take into account that 400,000 vehicles travel the connector daily, it doesn't indicate that there is a large problem in the downtown connector. It indicates that there is a lot of congestion.
She says driver behavior like speed, distracted and impaired driving, and lack of seatbelt use all contribute to serious crashes. Dale says GDOT currently has active or planned engineering projects aimed at boosting safety for every stretch on the hotspot list.
Got this car that caught on fire and that's been there for about a week.
But for Jay Springer, the real challenge is always the other drivers on the road.
What would you tell them?
I tell them about what happened to my daughter and how you don't know when you leave to go somewhere if you're ever gonna come back. I've seen people who left and then come back home. So I think that if anything can be said to everyone is, you're never in that big a hurry that you can't be safe.
In Atlanta, Zach Merchant, 11Alive News Investigates.
Yeah, and if you live in Atlanta, it seems like almost every other day that you drive that spot, you see some type of slowdown or crash.
Yeah, and you know, it kind of is one of those things where, like we said, living in a place like Atlanta, the congestion, the traffic, it is part and parcel with being here. But when it comes to safety, that's something that everybody can agree. You want to be boosting, want to be making better. You make a good point here, though, Jonathan, because when you say, look, you're traveling on the connector during the day, a lot of time things are moving pretty slowly because it's so congested. And we actually talked with Natalie Dale, who you just heard from in that piece. She's a GDOT spokeswoman, and we asked her about that, and she gave some pretty unique context to it. I think we have that sound. Let's tee it up.
We want to make sure, and we're looking at not just the number. There are this many crashes at this area. We want to look at what happened in those crashes. Why were they fatalities? Why were they serious crashes? And so when you look at, take the downtown connector, for example, most of those crashes occur that had high serious injuries or fatalities. They had occurred in the overnight hours. It is hard to get into a crash in the downtown connector in the middle of the day that has this high serious nature just because the speed limit is low due to congestion. So we look at what happened, and when we look at those overnight crashes, there's a lot of speed. I know during the pandemic, because we looked at a 10-year span for you, we look at speed. During the pandemic, speed increased, dangerous speeds increased on our roads. That led to a lot of fatalities. We looked at some of the other corridors that were on that list. A lot of pedestrian fatalities occurring in the overnight hours, in non-daylight hours. I think 80% of those occurred in non-daylight hours.
And she's right. I think you can really tell when you're driving the connector at night. I leave sometimes here after the 11 o'clock news, and you can see the speed really increasing, really on all interstates, but especially the connector.
You know, it's one of those things where, I mean, it's easy to blink and look down at your speedometer and feel like you're going just with the flow of traffic when it is late at night and things are going really quickly. And you heard from so many people in this piece, including from Natalie Dale there, that, you know, just taking the time to think through it and really be careful, be a safe driver is so key. Now, we focused, obviously, on arguably the worst spot of Georgia's roads when it comes to how many serious injury and fatality wrecks happen. That's the connector. But there are other spots also on the list of hotspots that will be familiar to Metro drivers, including stretches of Old National Highway and Candler Road. And we should point out, too, this hotspot list is actually broken down by the mile. These are individual mile-long stretches of roadway, so it really is pretty pinpoint data. And you heard Natalie Dale also point out that pedestrians are often involved in some of the worst wrecks, and that is a point that Georgia Tech professor James Sy, he also made when we talked to him, and he stressed that pedestrians, as well as cyclists and other non-cars on and near the roads, they can create elevated risks. What are the three biggest risk factors when it comes to contributing to dangerous crashes?
Yeah.
Is it speed, traffic? What are the top three?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, this is an excellent question. As a matter of fact, the factors contributing to the dangerous roadway, or the one of the factors there certainly logically is road, right? So is this road designed properly? The condition, is that good or not? Roads. Second is what? Is a human, the driver, right? What's his driver behavior?
Now, Professor Sy went on to say that speed and vehicle safety technology, they also contribute to how safe the roads can be. And he also pointed out something that might be a little unexpected if you're watching this. Of course, we've been focused on major highways for this report, but Professor Sy says there is also potentially growing risk on more low traffic roads. According to him, Georgia's senior citizen population is growing, and he says that basic infrastructure, like things as simple as crosswalk timers, sometimes they don't account for people who may take a longer time to cross the road. And he says a lot of his research now is focused on helping to make Georgia's infrastructure more friendly to seniors.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, and there was the same thing when we were talking to him, he brought it up, and it was sort of that light bulb moment when you think, sometimes, God forbid, you see a crash as you're driving into work, you're driving where you go, and obviously you hope that anyone involved, they're safe, but it seems like a simple thing. But then you start looking into it and you look at the data and you hear from somebody like Professor Sy, and there's so many little intricate factors that all contribute and come together to hopefully make the roads safer for all of us, senior citizens included.
Yeah, that's the goal. Zach, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And hey, folks, we do want to remind you that if you have a concern in your community that you would like Zach Merchant or 11Alive News Investigates to look at, you can always reach out by calling the number right there on your screen. It is 404-873-9111, or by emailing investigates@11alive.com. Thanks so much for joining us here on 11Alive News Investigates. We'll see you next time.